As the campaigns look toward the conventions and narrow their running mate choices, we're joined by two men on the vice presidential shortlist.
One person often mentioned as a potential vice presidential pick.
Two possible running mates. Some potential vice presidential running mates.
Talking about the situation in Georgia, Governor Kane, Senator Obama was criticized by the McCain campaign this week, particularly for his comments that there should be restraint on both sides after the invasion. Was he too weak in his initial response?
I think the senator gave a very measured response, which is the tone that we should take. As the secretary made plain, the goal is to use diplomatic means to get Russia to live by the ceasefire. And if diplomacy is the strategy at this point, measured tones is the way to go.
What's needed right now in the country is it judgment or experience. And I frankly think that judgment comes from experience. So when, for instance, the Georgian crisis arose, John McCain had been there multiple times. He knew the president of Georgia. He'd been to South Ossetia. He'd been around the world time and time again. He knew the people of the world. And while I don't look at these events that happen in the world and calculate their political implications, I do think that when the people of America are reminded of how dangerous the world is, they recognize the importance of selecting a person that has experience and judgment and wisdom.
Barack Obama knows we haven't had a Czechoslovakia for the last 20 years. He knows that Pakistan and Iraq doesn't border each other. He has shown not only good judgment, but he's shown the kind of ability to make the tough decisions you're going to have to make as President of the United States.
Tough, aggressive diplomacy, not bellicose threats. We have very little leverage over Russia right now. We need to create that leverage. And Senator McCain, you know, he's making a lot of rhetorical, bellicose statements, but without any specific policy.
John McCain says that we're all Georgians now.
We are not all Georgians now. If we were Georgians and the Russians were invading our country and killing our people, we'd be in a state of war. And clearly that's not what we want. And John, sometimes he's a good person, but he's a little bit given to this kind of bellicose rhetoric, which has a tendency to inflame conflicts rather than to diffuse them. And that's what you want in a president.
This is an issue where there is tough talk. The question is, has there been the kind of action on behalf of the United States over the last years that has been necessary to check Russia's ambitions?
There's been a lot of good talk out of Washington. There hasn't been enough action.
Well, I think the real challenge for President McCain or any president in the 21st century was how we hold other countries accountable. Since the United Nations is relatively ineffective, military is always the last resort. So I suspect that John would seriously promote the notion of reducing the G8 to G7 to send a signal to Russia.
Senator McCain has again shown that he has the judgment, the experience we need during these uncertain times. He had called even last year. He had said we should look at excluding Russia from the G8.
Senator McCain, for a long time, has been saying Russia should be kicked out of the G8.
Senator McCain wants to isolate Russia. That's the last thing we need to do. We need to engage them. If you isolate Russia, there's going to be more moves there towards radicalism, towards resentment.
We have one president in this country. Secretary of State Rice and President Bush need the support of both presidential candidates.
Are you suggesting that somehow John McCain undercut President Bush and Secretary of State Rice?
I think him doing press releases and sending some of his political allies to Georgia, I think some of it began to ring like a political campaign. There is only one president, and there's a line you can cross in terms of being presumptuous. They accused Barack Obama of being presumptuous for going to Europe and meeting with their allies. What is presumptuous is to try to undercut in any way the very difficult and tricky work that President Bush and Secretary Rice are trying to do right now.
I disagree with you in every way to suggest that John McCain's response to the aggression in Russia was anything other than appropriate. He called it exactly what it is, unprovoked aggression.
But didn't President Saakashvili of Georgia bring some of this on himself by going to South Ossetia?
If you mean by becoming a democracy and standing up for the principles of freedom, did he bring it on himself? I would certainly hope that would not be considered a cause.
But how about his military action in South Ossetia?
Well, certainly when his...
Maybe we have some responsibility, that maybe we promised the Georgians more than we could or should deliver should something like this break out.
I haven't seen any evidence that the United States of America has overpromised. One of the questions this crisis raises is, who do you want sitting across across the table from Vladimir Putin and people like him, John McCain or Senator Obama? And I think the answer is Senator McCain, and that's for obvious reasons. The surge.
Just as he was right to call for the surge in Iraq before it was popular, right on Iraq, on the surge.
I don't know how anybody could say Senator McCain was right on Iraq. I think he's been the sole cheerleader for Iraq, and he's probably the last remaining cheerleader for Iraq.
In all due respect, the surge. The surge.
Tim, you oppose the surge. So obviously reasonable people can, I read about it in your hometown newspaper.
I did not oppose the surge. I said I was skeptical of it because I thought it was too late. Like Senator McCain, I wanted it to start earlier. Senator Bai, unlike Senator Obama, said we should kick Russia out of the G8. He also supported the war, unlike Senator Obama. So,
well, of course we work with people around the world. This administration has, and John McCain is someone who has worked with people around the world, and we will work with those that are our strongest enemies. We'll sit across the table with them, negotiate.
Last night, these two candidates sat down for a forum in California with the evangelical, very popular preacher, Rick Warren, and they had an exchange that got to the heart of their foreign policy distinctions. Let's watch that.
Does evil exist? And if it does, do we ignore it? Do we negotiate with it?
Defeat it.
The deputy Republican vote counter in the Congress, Eric Cantor of Virginia, he's a strong supporter of John McCain, has been mentioned as a possible vice presidential running mate. I want Congressman Cantor to respond.
He is for a comprehensive...
Oh, unfortunately, we looks like we just lost the satellite. We apologize to Congressman Cantor.